Does that say recording? All right, we're up and running. Might want to zoom in a minute. What I missed the other day as I was finishing up circulation, I missed the electrical aspect of the heart, which is on page 696. So I want to put that up on the board because I'm pretty sure there's some test questions over this, and I caught it yesterday in the Monday, Wednesday class, and so I don't want to really mess this up today. And what we're looking at here is the sequence of electrical events that happen in the heart. And we have the SA node, sinoatrial node. We know that as the pacemaker of the heart. We have the AV node. And then we have a AV bundle that runs down through the septum. And then coming through the bottom here on both sides is what's called Purkinje fibers. You can zoom that in if that's not focusing in very good. And the electrical sequence starts with the SA node. Your pacemaker cruises at about 70 beats a minute. Now, if somebody checked your heart rate and it was running 60, it's not like you're dying. If it's running 80, it's not like you're dying. There's a pretty good range there. If you consistently stayed around 50, that probably wouldn't be good. Now, why is it a trained athlete's heart rate would be less than that of an untrained person?
Because it's used to working.
It's
hard.
more efficient.
We've trained it to be more efficient. The strength of it, the contractility strength is good enough to pump the same amount of blood with fewer pumps. So instead of needing 70 pumps to pump this amount of blood through, we have 60 pumps to pump it through, which in its own way is almost allowing it to rest more, not having to work as hard to get the same job done because it's stronger. Yes?
What's the bottom part of the heart?
This is Purkinje fibers. Purkinje fibers. Yeah. If I write sloppy, then I don't necessarily have to spell it correctly because you can't read it anyway. All right, so the sequence starts like this. We're at 70 beats a minute here, and the SA node sends electrical output throughout the atrium. Both atria contract at the same time. Okay. Granted, there's very little blood in the atria because most of it has simply diffused on through into the ventricles. This area through here does not conduct electrical current. So this electrical current that comes in the atria does not pass on down into the ventricles. It totally blocks it right there. So 0.2 of a second later, the SA node sends a message to the AV, which sends a message through the AV bundle into the Purkinje fibers, which gives us ventricular contraction. So it's obviously a very sequential thing that has to happen. Now, reading the book, you may run across another term for AV bundle. It may call it the bundle of His. It's spelled H-I-S, like his, but if they said his, then of course somebody'd be mad and said, what about mine? It's a hers, right? So they pronounce it His, so they can't do it one way or the other. That's just my theory on why that was put together. I don't know. I like Hiss though, right? The snake on Robin Hood, and that Hiss.
Why didn't they just add another S?
These doctors can't spell. They have to do things different, and it's Latin based, so who knows what the Latins do. So anyway, it comes down, and of course our electrical current starts at the bottom because we're pumping blood up, because your pulmonary is coming out here and your aortic arch is coming out here, and so we got to pump up. If we pump down, there's no place to go. Now, with that sequence known now, what happens if your SA node quits? You ever heard of anybody that the pacemaker quit?
You have no other.
You know somebody alive now that their pacemaker quit? No, not totally. They usually will live through it. It may take the doctors, when they finally, stubborn enough as they are, go to the doctor, and the doctor says, it's not, there's something wrong with your pacemaker. I'm gonna send you to a specialist. And the specialist gets you in 6 months later. Right before you're on your deathbed, you feel like crap, you're lethargic, you haven't done anything in 6 months, and the first thing the doctor does is, hop on that treadmill and see how far you can go. Well, he almost kills you right there in the hospital. But don't worry, The surgical team is just outside the door, we'll rush you in and save your life. We have to charge you more for emergencies, of course. That's, in reality, we made fun of what really happens. That's pretty scary. But quickly, they'll figure out when you collapse on the treadmill and get rolled under it a couple times and drag you out, you probably need a pacemaker. So we schedule you for a pacemaker, and we get this thing back to running at 70 beats a minute. And now they have them with automatic shockers in there that just kind of have them on their own. They may be doing just fine now, and bam, I just see them. You ever see one happen? Holy smokes, it's like. And then they have to go in every now and then and put in some new batteries, make sure everything's working good, but it's better than not having one. What happens, we get this one replaced, the AV node feels a little overworked. See, that's what happened. When this one quit, the AV node took over at 50 beats a minute. It'll do 50 on its own, but it needs to be really told to do 70. We've got this one fixed, and the AV node decides, I've been overworked and underpaid, I quit. Now what happens?
We got.
Maybe, maybe not. It's always a good answer though.
You're not gonna
There's,
have any contraction.
that's the only means of transferring information from the SA to the ventricles, is through this. So if it's not working, then no message from here gets to here. So with no message telling the AV bundle what to do, it automatically will kick in at 30 beats a minute. So are you alive?
Barely.
Not very long. If you have 70 beats a minute of blood coming in the ventricles and only 30 beats a minute of blood going out of the ventricles, what do you see?
Low blood pressure.
Flashes. You see congestive heart failure. Now that won't last very long unless we get it fixed. So we gotta fire the AV node back up. As far as I know, they don't replace many of those. It's either, let's recharge that baby, we've all seen ER, right? Clear, not good enough, crank him up, clear, oh, we got him, hey, we're good.
So what
It's
causes-
crazy how it works.
What causes hardening of the heart then? Like, literally, what causes your heart to harden?
To harden,
Yeah.
well, you see more cases where heart's hypertrophy than hardened. And hypertrophy would be a similar case where there's a lot more blood coming in than it has the strength to pump out. And so it gets bigger to hold the volume. Now hardening, some of that could be that actual thing. Vessels harden because they have to deal with so much high pressure for so long, instead of maintaining flexibility, they just harden. So-
And her heart's, the back side of her heart's hard.
It just lost flexibility for some reason. So, there's a lot of different things that go on with them. Arrhythmias, tons of arrhythmias. Some people deal with it all the time. Some people live a lifetime with different arrhythmias, and there's not a whole lot we can do about it. But there are some different AV node blocks. When you get in physiology, we'll talk a first, second, third degree AV node block. Where in a first degree, there's a few signals get through here. A second degree, there's a few fewer get through here. A third degree is a complete, and that's when it doesn't do anything, and that's when you'll lead to congestive heart failure, and you will die pretty quick if something's not done. So that covers the electrical excitation, which I had missed on Tuesday. And then takes us over to respiration, which we had started the beginning of respiration. And I discussed the fact that our lungs aren't the best out there. We're not the best terrestrial means of breathing. Although we're pretty good, we're not the best. And some of the questions in our lab today, in chapter 15, I think it's 15. It may be a different one, but it'll ask something about, no, I think this is actually in the pig lab. It'll ask why lungs are better than like gills for land. You know, what's the advantages of internal lungs over gills and land? What's the obvious?
There's not water.
Well, the gills are gonna dry out, and when they dry out, they're not gonna diffuse. being internal lungs, that prevents them from drying out. We have the protection, and not only from airborne problems, but from the drying out both. So, may not be the most efficient, but it's pretty good on land. The tracheal system is the most efficient on land, and it's a direct airflow system. All right. Where's my paper? Now we're going to get into the breathing aspect of this. And all this is going to point out is we're negative pressure breathers compared to frogs being positive pressure breathers, and how that happens is the main points this is going to make. First of all, we start with the actual pathway of air, where this air is passing through. We have the nose, the pharynx, glottis, larynx, trachea, bronchi, bronchioles, alveoli. I mean, that's your pathway of air as it flows through the system. Now, as air enters the system, there's three things that happens. And you learned this in grade school. Passes through the nose, three things that happen. Anybody name one of them?
Your lungs expand.
This is before the air makes it to the lungs. Your lungs do expand, but that's not the answer I'm looking for.
Are you talking about like how the hemispheres like
Filters,
and heats the air?
warms the air, and moistens the air. That's right. So it's almost as simple. We're thinking of something beyond. Warm, moistens, and filters. You ever breathe heavily during exercise and pretty cold air, and you're sucking in cold air? You ever feel that cold air go down before it really gets warmed up? We feel that, and we want it warmed up before it gets to the lungs. And one thing, it carries more oxygen. It diffuses more oxygen the warmer it is. Oh, in physiology, we'll dive deep enough into this that we'll understand why we are more efficient when our body's warmer. Our bodies will be warmer during times of fight or flight or exercise. Normally, in venous return, in blood that's low in oxygen, we'd have 7 to 9% saturation of oxygen normally. If we're out there exercising, that venous return is only 3 to 5%. We become that much more efficient simply because by warming up the blood, it dumps more oxygen. That's the way it works. If we had 2 buckets of water sitting here and one bucket was 10 degrees warmer than another bucket, which one would hold the most oxygen saturation in it? The cooler water or the warmer water? The cooler water would hold more. The warmer water would diffuse it out, would get rid of it. So you won't find fish in hot water. You'll find fish in cool water because there's more oxygen availability. And a good application here is fish use about almost 20% of their body energy just to breathe. We use like 2% to breathe. It's very minimal. We have 20.9, almost 21% saturation of oxygen in the atmosphere. A fish has 0.9% saturation in water. So this is a work in progress. This is some use of energy to get this job done. And that's why they have to use so much energy, and it comes so much easier for us. Of course, when we get to the fish chapter, we'll talk about how it's really a counter current. They'll bring it through the mouth, it'll circulate through the gills, and they'll suck it right back through the gills, right back out the mouth. So it actually sees the gills twice the same water to extract this oxygen from it. Where the blood coming through the gills is lacking oxygen, hopefully less than 0.9, and diffusion will go across to it. It's really a job for fish to, it'd be a struggle for us to breathe. I mean, there was a guy, and without oxygen, well, first of all, our nervous system will start malfunctioning. And here's a good example. There was 2 or 3 guys that was gonna climb Mount Everest. Well, it's pretty tall. I think the top of it's 27,000. It's way up there. You know what oxygen content is there at that level? Oh, you better have some oxygen with you. And so this guy, he made it to the top, and the beauty of being on top just amazed him so much, he stayed up there too long. And he starts coming down. Well, he has radios with his other 2 guys, which are not far, and they're telling him there's oxygen tanks at thus and such stop. Well, he's at the stop, and he says, these tanks are empty. Well, the guy knew they weren't. He just left them there. He said, no, they're not empty. Yes, they are. No, they're not. They're not going to do me any good. They just argued, and he never used the oxygen. He never made it off the mountain. He'd been so deprived of oxygen, he could not think clearly. He couldn't even see his hands in front of his face, so to speak. And that's what happens to the system. Everything starts shutting down with lack of oxygen. Now, we do things over time to build our oxygen carrying capacity. For instance, athletes it's gonna play in the Olympics or whatever. What's the #1 place in the United States athletes work out at to prepare for Olympics? Colorado. Yeah. Why do they call Mile High Stadium Mile High Stadium? That's 5,280 feet above normal. Well, the higher altitude you are, the less oxygen saturation our blood cells will do, so your body will actually make more red blood cells. So now that we make more red blood cells and we drop down to sea level, where we have more oxygen pressure, our oxygen carrier capacity is way up, isn't it? So they got this great idea we can do this, and then we can take depot shots, which makes your body make more red blood cells, which is illegal. And we'll have so many red blood cells, we'll have oxygen till the end of the, oh yeah, and your heart's pumping sludge, and it gives people heart attacks and kills them, but that's why it's illegal. It's unsafe for health. But we compensate. You ever hear the term, people that live up north are thick-blooded, and people that live down south are thin-blooded? It's really true. Thick-blooded because of more red blood cells in the system. Thin-blooded because we don't need as many to carry the same oxygen down south at sea level. So we can apply these terms to thickness of the blood. Dead air space, this is the space in which we don't have a plunger punching air out. It's where air gets trapped. And every time you breathe in 500 milliliters of air. That's a normal breath. But only 350 of that is new air. 150 of that is dead air space. It's found in dead air space, which is from the mouth to the bronchioles. Every time you suck air in, there was old air stuck in there that didn't get plungered out, if you will. And it makes sense. Tidal volume is a normal breath, 500 milliliters, 150 is old air, 350 is new air. So if we had one word to describe breathing, what would it be? What's the next word on the list there? Diffusion. That's how we breathe, whether it be at the lung level or at the tissue level, diffusion makes it all work. So our breathing is simple diffusion, is all it is. So a lot of books break it up into internal breathing, internal respiration, and external respiration. External respiration is between air and lungs. Internal respiration is between blood and tissues. So we're further in. And it's all diffusion. To give you an idea of some of the stats here, when air is 20%, 21% oxygen, and we breathe it into the lungs, and the blood coming through the lungs now is venous blood from the right side of the heart. Say it's 9% oxygen, we can see greater air coming in and diffusion occurring. Then we go to the tissues, which have used oxygen. We're carrying arterial blood to the tissues now, which has significant saturation, much more than what the tissues have just used, so we diffuse across. So it's pretty quick and simple diffusion. So inspiration is an active process. It does take energy to inspire. The diaphragm is going to lower, the ribs are going to raise. Like we said on Tuesday, we lower pressure in here compared to atmospheric pressure, and we're negative pressure breathers, so what it sounds like we're sucking air, it's rushing in. Expiration's passive. You just simply relax the muscles that you just used to breathe with or to inspire with. And I hesitate sometimes to use the term expiration. It sounds like, whoop, they're gone. So exhalation's used in a lot of books. Expiration, it could be like barium on that periodic table. It could be confused or misused. The element barium, what do you think of medically when you hear the term barium? Barium enema. Well, some doctors misuse that and say that's what they do when CPR fails. They just bury the patient. Barium. So that's why we have to be real careful with the terminologies that we use. He said barium? No, the element. Don't go barium. Element, barium. So, in the way we talk around here, I don't know if you said ranch or wrench. Go get the ranch. I can't carry 300 acres over here. Go get the monkey ranch, There's no monkeys on the ranch. You can't clarify all this stuff, so. All right, so we passively relaxed, diaphragm come up, ribs lowered. We're about 263 millimeters of mercury, or 763, not 200. Boy, we're really messed up if that's the case. 763, we built pressure inside and we exhaled. You're gone. Frogs breathe by positive pressure. Your breathing center is the same area as your cardiac center, the medulla. Water boy's favorite part of the brain, right? Have we watched the show yet? Yes? Okay. It's a prerequisite to all my classes. We refer to it a lot in physiology. Especially, we even label the guy on the sidelines that he's got eyes going different directions and you never know what he's really saying. We label him in physiology. He fits a category in physiology. All right, tracheal system in vertebrates is the most efficient of all respiratory systems. So, simply put, we're not the most efficient respiratory system out there. Invertebrates have a better tracheal system. Now, when I say invertebrates, we're grasshoppers, a lot of different insects. But there's other means of respiration. A lot of spiders have what's called book lungs, which is really efficient for them as well. So some of them use tracheal systems, some spiders use book lungs. Now, I'm not sure what the structure of book lungs are, but they sound quite interesting, don't they? So there are different ways, and of course when we go aquatic, then you're looking at gills. And then of course you have your aquatic mammals that's got a surface. But man, what a hold time they have for, wouldn't you like to have that kind of hold time? We'd be some serious swimmers, wouldn't we? That's why they are and we're not. They have some serious hold time, but the aquatic mammals certainly are unique in that category. Any questions? And we'll be hitting on some of this as we go up through other chapters and they talk about the different systems, but I think we pretty much got everything covered on 700 and 701. 702 is positive and negative breathing. We covered that. 703 is your pathway of air, which we have up here on these notes. Then expiration and tidal volume is mentioned on the right-hand side of 703, so we've covered that. Of course, now in our terrestrial lungs, the trachea are the, am I saying that right? The alveoli, that's what I'm trying to say, are the sacs that is where gas exchange occurs. That's where the oxygen levels, lots and lots of capillaries in the lungs, as we already know. The alveoli is where that gas exchange occurs. There's some diseases that damage lungs. Can you name a common disease that damages lungs besides pneumonia?
Emphysema.
Emphysema. And that's kind of a different twist, because emphysema's damage to lungs is a permanent tissue damage, and where these alveoli are larger than normal, and it traps air. In emphysema, you don't have difficulty in inspiring, you have difficulty breathing out, exhaling. So they can suck air in all day, they just can't get it out. And so it's a different twist. You've heard of mesothelioma, is it omia, something like that? Well, you have asbestos, coal dust get in the lungs. I tell in physiology class for years, teachers dealt with white lung, too much chalk dust, but I never got that in books yet. Now we sniff markers and we're a lot happier. We hadn't seen the damage that's gonna cause yet, but I figure right after retirement, it'll be some cancer causing agent that's in these markers, so. Chalk's a lot cheaper, I'll tell you that. But, then we went to hypoallergenic chalk. We got less dust out of that, so. I just worry about the teachers I see come in, it's got black on their nose, and they claim that they got it on their hands and rubbing it on. Well, they're sniffing the markers, what it's doing. So we gotta be addicted to something. And on page 704, there's something interesting on this page. Of course, they list the medulla, coordinating breathing, and there's an equation there. CO2 plus H2O yields H2CO3, that's carbonic acid, which turns into hydrogen and bicarbonate. This is, notice the arrows are pointing both ways. This is a reversible reaction. So we breathe out CO2, right? And we're gonna lose some water. The carbonic acid is gonna be formed, and this is like being carried in the blood. Let's look at it like this. Carried in the blood, the CO2 joins with water, becomes carbonic acid, and then when it enters into the lungs, it breaks back down into bicarbonate and hydrogen. And there are other places that it does that as well. Hydrogen we can excrete through the kidney. Carbon dioxide we can excrete through the lungs, so we can break it back down on the other end. Bicarbonate we use as pH buffers in the system. So while it's circulating, we use it for buffers, and then we convert it back so we can exhale it either through the kidney or through the lungs. So being a reversible reaction is pretty unique. Now, if I ask you a question on the test that in what form is most carbon dioxide carried, it's going to be carried in the form of bicarbonate. That's the conversion form. Now, there is some that is dissolved in plasma, but compared to the amount of bicarbonate, it's very minimal. So the number one means of carbon dioxide carried in the blood is in the form of bicarbonate, which is HCO3. And I feel like that question might be on the test, so I'll throw that out there for you. Bicarbonate. And you'll probably see HCO3 instead of it spelled out, so be familiar with that. All right, that takes us on over to 706. And they talk about the respiratory pigments a little bit. Of course, for us, the red blood cells have hemoglobin. Hemoglobin, an iron group, and pigment of heme comes together, and that's our oxygen carrying capacity in the red blood cells. Some invertebrate animals have more of a hemolymph because they don't have a pumping organ. It's moved by muscle contraction, just like our venous return is moved by muscle contraction. Now, they use the term oxyhemoglobin. That's hemoglobin saturated with oxygen. If it's deoxyhemoglobin, that's hemoglobin not saturated with oxygen. So hopefully the terminology is not. Now, it's carbioxyhemoglobin. That's hemoglobin full of carbon monoxide, and that's poisonous. Our blood cells love carbon monoxide. If we had equivalent carbon dioxide in this room as we do oxygen, we'd all be dead. It would suck up the carbon dioxide in a hurry. So fortunately, we're gonna have teensy-weensy amounts of carbon monoxide out there in society. So that's why you hear of that kind of poisoning every now and then. Well, that finishes chapter 31. That takes us over to chapter 32. 32 is digestion. Not a long chapter, not a difficult chapter. I mean, what better time than around lunchtime to talk about digestion, right? So let's begin this chapter by looking at a few terms here for about 10 minutes, and then we'll break, go upstairs and do our lab. This digestion and nutrition, we could probably throw nutrition in there for a long time, start counting calories, and we'd all be depressed and never want to come back to school. Start going the health buff thing and say, I forget it, it's not even worth living anymore. And part of enjoying a life is eating foods you like to eat, right? So that's probably my addiction in life. I mean, we was talking about that in physiology. There's a case in physiology that talk about they believe that they've identified an alcoholic gene, and of course, when they say they believe, it's not proven, but they think they've got it pinpointed, and so they threw the scenario out there. We have twins born to alcoholic parents and separated at birth in different societies. What's apt to happen to those twins as far as alcoholism comes about? What do you think? They become alcoholics regardless of the situation?
I think that they'll have that addiction gene, right?
We have to trigger the gene somehow, right?
You don't drink if you're not around it, you're not.
What if they were raised by one family that didn't drink and they never really thought much of it, and they just wasn't around it, so it just wasn't part of their life?
I think they still carry the gene.
Not arguing that fact, but did we trigger the gene for them to become an alcoholic?
Yes.
You gotta drink to become an alcoholic, last time I checked, correct?
I think as long as it's not triggering anything,
But the next one, may have been raised in a family, maybe mom and dad drank very little, but they'd have a glass of wine every now and then, or they'd have a beer every now and then, and so they took a couple of drinks and it's pretty good. So they start drinking a little more, mom and dad's not watching. Then we triggered the gene, didn't we? If the gene's there, we're still skeptical about that. How many think the gene's there? You got the gene? Well, one interesting poll I do in all the classes is like, okay, how many's had a drink of alcohol? And most people has had a drink of alcohol. Then you ask, how many liked it? Well, there'll be fewer. Some drink because, I drink every now and then because nobody's drinking, and we need to relax. Okay, that's fine. No big deal. But, if you don't like it, you don't tend to drink a whole lot of it, right? But if you really like the taste, to me, beer stinks. I don't know why anybody would drink it. I don't even like the smell of it, but that's just I'm pretty sure I don't have the alcoholic gene if it's there. Now, I had an uncle that was an alcoholic. I mean, yeah, I never seen so many beer cans in my life. It wasn't hardcore liquor, it was beer, by the cases. And he could drink it and still be sober.
oh my goodness.
I never seen nothing like it. He's in absolute horrible health now. He's younger than my dad. But he's in bad shape. He's had strokes and everything else. But, the drinking cost him most of his life because his wife left him. Never remarried. And it just, that's part of it. But he had some kind of gene going on there, or he just liked beer. I don't know. He drank a lot.
Sounds like
But it doesn't have to be hardcore. It can be, But don't you think a lot of it comes down to influence, maybe friend influence, whether it be peer pressure or parental influence, positive or negative, down to your individual choice to fire off the gene or not fire off the gene, and then personalities which you're inherited from parents. Your personality, some personalities are more addictive personalities than others. We're all addicted to something, whether we consider it good, bad, or ugly. How many of y'all is addicted to a cell phone that's attached to you somewhere? I mean, that's probably the addiction of today is electronics of some kind, which makes us more available to be addicted to other bad things. Pornography is much more available today. At one time, I think the American population back in the 80s spent $10 million on pornography. Today they're spending, well, I say today, back in right around 2000, it was estimated this spending $10 billion on pornography.
I'm sure it's way more.
And it's mainly because it's more available. More available. So, somebody does. Somebody does. So, with addictive personalities, whether it's an addictive alcoholic gene or just an addictive gene, that's, I think the personality falls into that, but I don't know if we can say, yeah, that one's for alcohol, that one's for pornography, that one's for something that, I don't think it'd be difficult, it'd be hard.
I think you either have the.
There's a lot of
addictive
things
don't.
involved in that though, isn't there, to make that. I've seen kids grow up in households, maybe one of the parents is alcoholic, and I don't ever wanna be like that, and they make the choice to, I'm just not gonna do that. And then other ones say, oh, my dad was a slug, why can't I be a slug? I can sit there and drink 20 beers with him just like he does, and they use that for an excuse to become what he was. So, well, I'm glad that's part of digestion, because we just digested a lot there, didn't we? Well, I left the physiology class for this yesterday. It all comes down, what they decided, it all comes down to choice to trigger this whole deal. Now, there's other influences upon that choice that tempt you or don't tempt you for that, but we have to make a choice, because if you don't make a choice, you just made a choice not to make a choice, so I left them with the same thing I left y'all before, because not making a choice was making a choice. The only thing about choices is you never get to choose the consequence of your choice. So, there's my sermon for today, which you've already heard once before, I think, so feed and feeding. Let's start some terms on 7-Eleven. Autotrophic. These are terms you're gonna see more of, so they're not hard. They're gonna pop up on at least a couple different tests, because they're simple. Autotrophic are organisms that produce their own food. Produce their own food. Automatic. Good term. Phototrophs produce food from light. Produce food from light. Chemotrophs produce food from chemicals. It's usually in some form of energy. You can even, phototrophs and chemotrophs can almost be together, because a plant could fit both of those, because it uses a chlorophyll, which is a chemical, and sunlight, the combinations. And there's some single-celled organisms, like we'll look at some euglena and volvics that both utilize that. Then we drop down to heterotrophic, that's us. Heterotroph, we have to consume our food from some other source. We have to consume our food from some other source. And then the big terms that you'll see over and over: a herbivore eats plants, a carnivore eats meat, and an omnivore likes a little salad with a steak. Plants and animals. Which one are we?
Herbivores.
We're an omnivore. We're an omnivore.
I think it's based upon each individual.
There are some individuals that are more carnivorous than omnivorous, right? And a bear is considered an omnivore as well, because they like their fruits and berries and honey, and if you throw a biscuit out there, they'll eat it too, but they'll also eat a slab of meat if you throw it out there, so you get to looking pretty good after a while, because they may just chew on you for a while. And when bear first started coming into Oklahoma, there's a few people had nuisance bear that was tearing into dog food and everything else, and one particular farmer was losing some calves, and there was one bear that was a carnivorous son of a gun, and so he called the wildlife department. They said, oh, it's not a bear. Bears, they're vegetarians. Well, that's not true. And the wildlife department knew that. They just didn't want their wild animals being blamed to kill somebody. This guy had proof. I mean, he had seen the calf in the bear's mouth. And needless to say, they got it worked out. They got some traps set out there and things like that, and took care of it. But it was a different situation, where we have more mountain lions around here now. They're pretty much carnivorous. Whether it be a small bunny rabbit or a deer, they're gonna want some meat. Occasionally you'll see your cat chewing on grass. I always thought they was wormy when they did that, so you might want the little worm medicine in that cat for that. All right, so on the next side over here, filter feeding. Filter feeding or suspension feeders. You know, whales are technically some form of filter feeder, believe it or not. But we would think more filter feeders like shrimp. How many like shrimp? You like shrimp? I love shrimp.
Shrimp and steak.
But, and it, you know, and I just ignore the fact of what they actually eat, because they're one of the nastiest things out there you could eat. Catfish are bottom feeders, which they feed off detritus material that other animals have left on bottom. Well, that's crap. That's channel cat. It's not flatheads. Flatheads eat live things only. So, you know, they're all different. Flipping the page over to feeding on food masses. It tells us on 713 that predators must locate, capture, hold, and swallow prey. Many carnivorous animals simply seize food and swallow it intact, while some employ toxins and paralyze or kill prey upon capture. So, we can apply several examples here. You see at the top of the page, here's a snake swallowing a whole egg. Egg's bigger around than snake is. Have you ever seen this in real life? It's pretty cool. First time I ever just remember seeing it, as a small kid, for some reason, I like chickens. So my parents bought me some chickens and built a little chicken pen. I took care of the chickens. Of course, that was good for them. I took care of them. They got eggs. Well, I went out there and gathered them. The nest is up here. I couldn't even see in the nest. I just reach up there. Well, I grabbed me a hand of black snake one time. And of course, the snake was busy with an egg. I just felt something slimy and started hollering. Here come Dad around there. He knew what it was. He brings a hoe and he scoops that snake out, throws it out in the chicken yard, and he pins that snake right behind the egg. The egg probably wasn't 4 to 6 inches already down. And when he pinned it, the snake shot the egg, coughed up the egg, intact. And then he killed the snake and threw it out in the road so somebody could run over it. Double kill, you know. We've all done it. I've killed snakes, laid them on railroad track before. Then he turned around and asked me, he said, what'd you do with that egg? And I said, I put it in the egg bucket. He said, don't tell your mother. They were all white eggs, so this one just had a little slime coat on it. But I always wash the eggs. They had me trained. I washed the eggs, put them in an egg carton, put them in the fridge. I washed off the slime. She never knew the difference. To this day, if anybody tells her, not to the end. But you know, this is a case swallowing whole. I've seen these black snakes capture rats, mice, swallow them whole. I mean, that's what they do. Now, you get into your poisonous snakes that we have around here, and then they're going to employ a toxin. Let the kill run off, and they'll track it up with heat sensing and chemical devices, and when they find it, it's not going to give them a bite. They eat it whole. So that's all that's talking about, is the ability to capture and seize these animals. Now, once a capture is made, the pharynx is retracted and prey swallowed. Fishes, amphibians, non-avian reptiles use their teeth principally to grip prey. In most of the cases, that's it, grip prey, to prevent its escape. You know, all these, even non-poisonous as well as poisonous snakes, have 2 rows of teeth in the center of their mouth, inside the fangs if they're poisonous. If not, they actually are spread out a little more. And the teeth are bent backwards into their mouth. You ever like drive into a park and you drove across these spikes and they laid down, but you're not going to come back out that way, or the spikes, that's the way these teeth are laid. So when they start swallowing something head first, and they start putting their feet in, backing up, they back right up into those teeth, which is going to keep them coming. I mean, it's all a perfectly laid out plan. When they start down the hatch, they're probably not coming back up unless snake chooses to cough them back up. So, and they go down so far and they suffocate. I mean, I found chickens in my chicken house lying there dead, and their heads slimy all the way down to the end of their neck. The snake thought he could eat it, got that far and decided, this is a little more than a mouthful, coughed it back up, the chicken was already suffocated. See? So it happens. Now we have different teeth involved. On the right hand side 713, we have incisors designed for biting, cutting, stripping. And I think there's actually another chapter on mammals that we talk about these as well. Canines for seizing, piercing, and tearing. Premolars and molars are the back of the jaw for grinding and crushing. Herbivores usually lack canines, but have well-developed molars with enamel ridges for grinding. I mean, a lot of herbivores don't even have any upper front teeth. And I say that, depends on the species. Cattle don't have upper front teeth. Horses do. Look at a pasture of horses grazing in, and it's as short as that carpet. Because they can get right down and nip it, just like a pair of scissors. You'll never see a cow pasture that short because they literally have to tear the grass. They pin their teeth with a gum and tear the grass. So horses are more likely to cut it, where cattle they're more likely to pull it up by the roots if it's not rooted well. An elephant's tusk, modified upper incisor used for defense, attack, and rooting. And then a male wild boar has modified canines used for weapons. If you never messed with a wild pig, don't, because you'll find out the hard way. They're crazy, for one thing. Herbivores, or plant eaters, have evolved special devices for crushing and cutting plant materials. Different ones, different ways. You get into cattle, and you have a 4-chambered stomach, where you have different things going on in each stomach. First stomach's basically storage. We have a few, and we refer to them in the animal world as bugs. There's protozoans and bacteria in there that start breaking down, and then when that gets full, then they lay down, they regurgitate it up, and they get it in their jaw just like a cut of tobacco and just chew on it. But what's the chewing purpose? Just to pacify them? Is it like their own little pacifier? No, it's to help break down the cell walls in the plant and grind them up. And they'll swallow it, cough up some more, swallow it, cough up some more. And then once it's ground down and the protozoans and the bacteria attack it, the time it gets to the last stomach, then the acid finishes it off. We can eat the same grass, but we get nothing out of it. We really get nothing out of lettuce, to be honest. Basically what comes in goes out. That's what lettuce is used for. Look at that however you want to. That kind of come out ugly, didn't it? Insects such as locusts have grinding and crushing mandibles. Herbivores, mammals such as horses and cattle use wide corrugated molars for grinding. So then you have the feeding on fluids, of course. These are a lot of your insects that feed on fluids, such as what's your number one insect that feeds on fluids that we're familiar with that carry every disease imaginable?
Mosquitoes.
Yeah, now let me narrow that down for you. It's the female mosquito that sucks blood. There is a lesson to be learned there. It is the female that sucks blood. Female mosquito, I meant to say. But it is true. See, what does a male do? What most males do? Nothing. He drinks nectar, which I'm sure she has to go get for him, right?
I didn't know.
So she's out doing all the work. She needs blood because the protein content of it for her eggs. She needs a little better diet than his little sweet nectar juice that he's fattening up on over there doing nothing. So, but I find that interesting though. A mosquito is a
I didn't know
mosquito.
that.
I didn't know that for years, but when you kill that one on your arm and there's a big of blood because it's really been sucking something dry, it is a big female that you just took out. Because only the females are going to attack you. The males are probably too lazy to even attack. So, find one sitting on a tree and you go by and it doesn't move, it was a male. Lazy sucker. He's probably filling out an application for government funding. Just gets worse, don't it? So mosquitoes are in there. There's tons of other ones out there that do this. There's black fly. You get in other countries, and we're going to talk about a lot of these diseases and stuff. But there's malaria carried by mosquitoes, and then tsetse flies, black flies, river blindness, different diseases carried by these different parasites. And these are external parasitic type insects, and they feed off fluids. Then, of course, a lot of other insects feed off forms of nectar, your butterflies and different kinds of bugs. In botany, we talk about different different kinds of flowers attract different kinds of insects. And, you know, brightly colored flowers attract more of your bees. If you go into a garden and see garden plants blooming, most of them are yellow. The blooms are yellow or real bright in color. Think about squash and watermelons and cucumbers and cantaloupe, all the same color. What's your number one pollinator? Honeybees. They love that color. Then when you get out in the field and you see some old weeds, not only do they stink, but they'll be off color. If they have any color at all to them, those are beetles that will be attracted to those as pollinators. So, feeding on fluids, whether it's nectar or blood, that's a fluid. It says, unfortunately for humans and other warm-blooded animals, the ambiguous mosquito excels as the blood-sucking habit. Alighting gently, the mosquito punctures its prey with an array of 6 needle-like mouth parts, not 1, 6, and inject anticoagulant saliva. Irritating itch from the following bite: malaria, yellow fever, encephalitis, and only the females dying on blood. Now, vampire bats eat blood. Now, we have tons of bats in the United States. Not sure we have a vampire bat in the United States. Don't think we do. Our bats in the United States are insectivores. They're all insectivores. So everybody used to think, oh, bats carry rabies because they suck blood. Ours don't. They eat insects. They're eating that blood-sucking mosquito. We want to encourage bats because they fill a niche that birds don't. Kill insects at night. When did insects come out?
At night.
At night. It's really a cool niche if you think about it. I saw one the other night. I hadn't seen many, but at one time, farmers and ranchers were highly encouraged to put up bat houses and things around bodies of water where your mosquitoes are going to be to encourage it. Only thing I saw live in mine were dirt daubers, so I don't know where.
There's not a lot here. There's a lot in Texas, like Fort Worth area. There's tons of bats.
There's more bats south. In fact, our bats what we have here migrate there for the winter. Our bats don't migrate out of the United States. New Mexico, they love going down to Mexico. That's the biggest thing they'll do. I don't think they cross into Mexico. I think it's New Mexico. He was thinking they was going down on a beach, wasn't he?
We put up those bat
Gotta figure it
houses
out.
around our pools and stuff and our ponds, and they started flying in and dying, so we had to take them down.
Flying into the bat houses and dying.
No, like we put the bat houses up
Yeah.
around and they would stay, and we had all those lights, those big old light pole lights,
Yeah.
and they were around our pool, and they would fly down by the water and fly into the water and die.
Oh.
We killed like 12, so we had to get rid of our bat houses.
That's why you don't see many around here. She's a killer.
It's not my
let's
fault
see.
that they don't know their directions.
I was thinking of something else a while ago. Well, you know, in the bat situation, they take razor sharp teeth, and I was watching a documentary on that the other night where a guy actually filmed some of this. And razor sharp teeth and land on the back of a cow or some large mammal and shave, and they use anticoagulant in their saliva. They start lapping it up like a dog, and man, blood's just running down the side of that animal, and that animal just laying there. They didn't even know they was bleeding, and they get full. And when they fly back, not every vampire bat in that colony will get a meal that night. If they go like 3 days without a meal, they'll die. So the ones that do get meals fly back, and they regurgitate some of that meal and feed their colony. If they don't, that colony remembers it, and they'll never be shared with again. And if they go 3 days in a row, now they're on their own, they'll die.
That's pretty cool.
So share and share alike, or catch you later. You know, nature has its way, don't it? I mean, we can learn a lot from the way a lot of these animals, and some of it's crude, but some of it's real applicable to what we could do as supposedly the smarter of the animals, right? You wonder about it sometimes. So it takes us to digestion. Just mark that page right there on 715, and we will start up there when we come back and get into the basics of the enzymes and things like that. So we'll muddle our way up the stairs, get up there in about 10 or 15 minutes, and we'll take our lab test and commence with lab 3 and 15. I don't know if the door is open up there or not. You'll turn that off for me, if you will.